Atrocious and pervasive violence against civilians is unacceptable, and I do not stand for it. This belief leads me to be anti-colonial and leads to many of my leftist views. So while I have not lended much of this platform to advocacy against the atrocious human rights violations committed by Israel against the Palestinians, I do think, and have been for a very long time, a personal advocate against the Israelis' actions against the Palestinians. And if you are, rightly so, appalled at the violence being committed in the Israeli-Palestine conflict currently, it is incredibly relevant to educate yourself on the widespread pain, suffering, conflict, and oppression engaged in that area. So while I certainly support widespread condemnation of violence in this area, it is extraordinarily disappointing to see that this only comes after a long period of complacency and silence on the West, while actively supporting the mass amount of oppression and state-enforced violence and human rights violations committed in this area by the Israeli state. Further, it is incredibly disappointing to see people, especially progressives in America, actively ignore the atrocious actions continuing and will very likely ramp up within the coming days by the Israeli state. I do not talk about this issue because this is not my primary place of knowledge. This is not my primary issue to know, and there are much more knowledgeable people on the topic. But a few things are incredibly important and so clear that they must at least be noted. First of all, it's very clear that you can be anti-Zionist while not being anti-Semitic. Suggesting that these two are the same is a long-standing propaganda tactic by the extraordinarily Zionist, extremely far-right government currently empowering the Israeli state. There was a recent letter signed by over 1,000 prominent Jewish academics and scholars calling out the usage of this scare tactic by the Zionist Israeli government. So please, do not fall for it. Equally, you do not have to conflate the actions of any given group within Palestine with the wills, wants, and powers of the Palestinian people and their best interests. Secondly, within the coming days, the Western media and the media at large will consistently downplay the negative impacts of the Israeli response. They have already hurt hundreds of people within the Gaza Strip. Once again, do not fall for it. While Palestine does inflict some harm to Israel, Israel has for a very long time been the much more powerful state and has well used that to subjugate and further colonize rightful Palestinian lands, even by their own admission. And finally, I stand firmly against colonialism, against an apartheid state, and against further harm and human rights violations supported by the West. Beyond that, I recognize the hurt, the harm, the absolute atrocities committed within the past few days in that area. And my heart goes out to all the victims across that area. Beyond that, I'm going to comment some important communicators and historical communicators that hopefully can add much more context and knowledge than I conceivably could. And please do go engage with them. They educate me and they are incredibly helpful. I do just want to end this with, this is not the issue that I engage with the most. This is not the issue I have the most knowledge on. This is not the issue I have the most views on. But there is such strong propaganda and misinformation and flagrant and utter lies coming out of many, many sources after years and years of a Western-backed country in the Middle East having much, much more power than its adversaries. But there is such strong, well-funded, and consistent propaganda coming out on this. I would be disappointed in a creator that at least did not speak on this in some way to try and counteract it. If you have questions, I'm happy to answer, but equally there are many more people with much more knowledge on this. It's just quite important we engage with this, not from barbaristic sides, but truly attempting to engage with peace, understanding the context as a whole.